In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where 1,000 alien species trade, negotiate, and coexist in the sprawling station nexus, there exists an unspoken rule that every being understands. Some creatures are simply untouchable, not because they're dangerous, but because they carry something far worse than venom or claws. They carry the mark of a dead world. For 3 months, a small human child has wandered the station's lower levels, surviving on scraps and the occasional dropped morsel. Every species that encounters her takes one look and hurries away, their various forms of expressions twisted in disgust, fear, or pity. The Zalari pull their crystalline children closer when she passes. The mighty Corvin warriors, who fear nothing in battle, cross to the other side of corridors to avoid her path. Even the scavenging Nyx, creatures that eat garbage, won't share their finds with her. She is Zara, age 7, the last known survivor of Earth, a planet that died in screaming agony while the galaxy watched and did nothing. But today, something impossible is about to happen. Today, a human ship will dock at Station Nexus for the first time in 5 years. Today, Captain Marcus Reed will discover that Earth's children still exist. And today, the galaxy will learn why you should never abandon humanity's young. The universe is about to remember why humans are the most terrifying species ever to reach for the stars. Not because of their weapons or their wars, but because of what they'll do when they find their own. Zara pressed herself against the cold metal wall of maintenance level 7, her small fingers clutching a piece of stale protein bar she had managed to snatch from a Corvin trader's dropped supplies. The massive warrior hadn't even noticed the loss, too busy arguing with a Zalari merchant about shipping costs to the Outer Rim colonies. 3 months of living in the shadows of Station Nexus had taught her to be invisible, to move like smoke between the legs of giants who would rather pretend she didn't exist. The protein bar tasted like recycled cardboard, but it was food, and food meant another day of survival. She had learned not to be picky during those first terrifying weeks after the transport ship had abandoned her here. The captain, a regalian with scales that shifted colors when he lied, had promised her aunt would come for her. That had been 97 days ago. Zara had stopped counting after that, but her young mind couldn't help but keep the number anyway. A group of Nyx scavengers rounded the corner, their chittering voices echoing off the metal walls. Zara quickly stuffed the protein bar into her makeshift pouch, a torn piece of fabric she had salvaged from the waste disposal units, and prepared to run. The Nyx were usually harmless, more interested in finding discarded technology and food scraps than bothering with other beings, but they had made it clear that even they wouldn't share space with her. The lead Nyx, its 6 eyes blinking in sequence, spotted her immediately. Its mandibles clicked and what she had learned was disgust, and it chittered something to its companions in their rapid-fire language. They quickly turned down another corridor, leaving behind a small pile of salvaged components they had been sorting. The message was clear: better to lose potential profit than remain near the cursed human child. Zara waited until their chittering faded completely before emerging from her hiding spot. She approached the abandoned pile cautiously. Among the twisted pieces of metal and broken circuits, she found a small datapad with a cracked screen. It still flickered with power, though the display was fragmented. With Trustetti, she had been trying to learn the station's common trade language from scraps like this, slowly piecing together words and meanings from overheard conversations and discarded educational materials. She settled into a small alcove behind a massive ventilation unit, one of the few places on the station where she could sit without being immediately spotted and moved along. The datapad's broken screen showed fragments of what looked like news feeds from across the galaxy. Most of it was standard trade information, shipping schedules, and political updates from various systems. But one fragment caught her attention, a partial headline that made her heart race: Human fleet movement detected in outer. Human! The word was like electricity through her small body. She tried to manipulate the controls with her tiny fingers, desperately attempting to see more of the article, but the datapad's damage was too severe. The screen flickered once more and went dark permanently. For a moment, Zara allowed herself to hope. Maybe there were others. Maybe her aunt hadn't been lying when she said there were human colonies far from Earth, places that had survived when their home world. She pushed that thought away. Remembering Earth meant remembering the screaming, the panic, the way her parents had looked when they put her on the evacuation transport with her aunt. She had been too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to know it was the end of everything she had ever known. A deep rumble echoed through the station's superstructure, followed by the mechanical voice of the station's artificial intelligence announcing incoming traffic. Attention all beings! Merchant vessel Stellar Wind requesting docking permission at Bay 17. Vessel registration indicates human origin. All station protocols for exotic species engagement are now in effect. Zara's small hands began to shake. Human origin, the first human ship to dock at Station Nexus since she had arrived. She had never seen another human being aside from her aunt, who had disappeared during their second week on the station. The Regalian captain had claimed she had left on another transport, but Zara had learned not to trust the words of adults who wouldn't meet her eyes when they spoke. She gathered her few possessions, the broken datapad, her makeshift pouch, and a small metal tool she had found that helped her open stuck access panels when she needed to hide. Her hiding spots were numbered now, mapped out through months of desperate survival. But today, she wouldn't be hiding. Today, she would go to Bay 17. The journey from Maintenance Level 7 to the docking bays required passing through the main commercial district, something Zara usually avoided at all costs. The crowds there were thick, and thick crowds meant more opportunities for someone to notice her, to complain to station security, to have her moved along to an even more remote part of the station. But the commercial district was also the fastest route to the docking bays, and something deep in her 7-year-old heart was screaming that this was important, that this was the chance she had been waiting for without knowing she was waiting. She emerged from the maintenance levels into the bright artificial lighting of Commerce Row. The cacophony of dozens of alien species conducting business in their various languages washed over her like a wave. Towering Corvan warriors negotiated with diminutive Polari traders, while Zalari merchants displayed their crystalline artwork to interested buyers. The air was thick with the sense of exotic foods, alien pheromones, and the ozone smell of energy weapons being demonstrated. As always, Zara's presence created a wake of revulsion and avoidance. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as beings spotted her. Mothers pulled their children closer. Traders covered their goods as if her very presence might contaminate them. A Corvan warrior actually spat on the ground in front of her, not at her, but creating a barrier of saliva she would have to step over. The message was clear. She was pollution, contamination, something to be avoided at all costs. She had learned not to cry at these reactions. Tears didn't change anything, and they made her vision blurry when she needed to watch for threats. Instead, she kept her head down and moved through the crowd like a ghost, taking the path of least resistance toward the docking bays. A Polari security officer spotted her and began moving in her direction, its small form weaving through the crowd with practiced efficiency. Zara quickly ducked behind a Zalari merchant stall, pressing herself against the crystalline display cases. The merchant noticed her immediately and made a sharp whistling sound of distress, its crystalline features shifting to deeper red patterns that indicated anger and fear. "Move along, little Deathbringer," the merchant sang in its melodious voice, the translation implant in Zara's ear making the words sound almost beautiful despite their cruelty. "Your presence brings ill fortune to my goods." Zara obeyed without argument. She had learned that arguing only brought more attention, and more attention meant getting caught by security. She slipped away from the stall just as the Polari officer reached it, the small alien's large eyes scanning the area where she had been hiding. The Zalari merchant pointed in the wrong direction, whether out of kindness or simply to get the security presence away from its stall. Zara couldn't tell, but she was grateful either way. The docking bay levels were less crowded but more heavily monitored. security checkpoints filtered the beings moving between the commercial levels and the actual ship berths. Zara had never made it past these checkpoints before. The few times she had tried, she had been immediately turned away and escorted back to the lower levels. But today felt different. Today, desperation gave her cunning she didn't know she possessed. She waited and watched, learning the patterns of the security rotation. When a large group of Corvin traders approached the checkpoint, their massive forms creating confusion as they argued with security about their cargo manifests, Zara slipped underneath their formation. Her small size, which had been a disadvantage in so many ways, finally served her well. With Trust Teddy, she crawled between their legs, careful not to touch them, until she was on the other side of the checkpoint. Bay 17 was at the far end of the docking level, and each step felt like a small victory. The corridors here were cleaner, brighter, designed to impress visiting dignitaries and wealthy merchants. Zara felt profoundly out of place with her dirty clothes and tangled hair, but she pressed on. Through the massive transparent aluminum windows, she could see ships of every size and configuration locked into their berths. Most were alien designs she didn't recognize, flowing organic curves or geometric crystal structures that defied conventional aerodynamics. But Bay 17 held something different. Through the observation window, she could see a ship that looked almost familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen its design before. It was smaller than most of the trading vessels, built for speed rather than cargo capacity. Its hull was scarred with what looked like weapon impacts and hastily repaired damage. This wasn't a merchant ship. It was something else entirely. As she watched, a section of the ship's hull opened, and a ramp extended to the docking tube. Zara pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the transparent surface as she waited to see who would emerge. Her heart hammered in her small chest as a figure appeared at the top of the ramp. It was tall, bipedal, wearing what looked like a military-style uniform in dark blue. The figure paused at the top of the ramp, and even through the distortion of the window and the distance, Zara could see the moment when the figure spotted the observation deck where she was watching. For the first time in 3 months, Zara found herself looking into the eyes of another human being. Captain Marcus Reed had seen horror across a dozen star systems. He had witnessed the glassing of rebel colonies, fought in the meat grinder campaigns against the Hive worlds, and survived the desperate evacuation of Earth's final transport ships as their homeworld died behind them. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of a tiny human child pressed against the observation deck window of Station Nexus, staring at him with eyes that held too much knowledge of suffering for someone so young. Reed was 43 years old and had been fighting humanity's wars since he was 16. He had spent the last 5 years believing that the few human colonies scattered across the Outer Rim were all that remained of their species. The idea that children might still exist, might still be alive somewhere in the galaxy, had been a hope he had forced himself to abandon. Hope was dangerous when you were commanding a ship full of soldiers who had already lost everything. But there she was, small and fragile and unmistakably human, watching him with an expression that was equal parts terror and desperate hope. Reed turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, who was reviewing the station manifest on her datapad. Chen, scan that manifest for any human passengers or residents registered on this station. Chen looked up from her pad, confusion clear on her scarred features. Sir? The diplomatic briefing said Station Nexus hasn't had human traffic in over 4 years. Check anyway. Chen's fingers worked across the pad's surface, her expression growing more puzzled by the moment. Nothing, sir. No human registrations. No human passengers on incoming or outgoing vessels. No human businesses or diplomatic presence. According to this, we're the first human vessel to dock here since the Proxima evacuation ended. Reed looked back toward the observation deck, but the small figure was gone. For a moment, he wondered if the stress of command was finally getting to him, if he was seeing ghosts of the children they hadn't been able to save. But something deep in his soldier's instincts told him what he had seen was real. Chen, I want you to conduct a full security sweep of this docking bay. Standard protocols, but be thorough. I'm going to handle the diplomatic check-in with station administration. Sir, is there a specific threat you're concerned about? Reed paused, his hand on the ship's communication panel. Just being careful, Lieutenant. This station sees traffic from every hostile species we've encountered. Better safe than sorry. But as he walked toward the station's administrative offices, Reed's mind wasn't on potential threats from alien species. He was thinking about a small human child who shouldn't exist, who had looked at him through a window with eyes that had seen too much. If she was real, if there were human children somehow surviving alone in the galaxy's neutral zones, then everything he thought he knew about the war they were fighting might be wrong. And if they were alone, abandoned, surviving on the charity of species that despised humanity, then Reed had a new mission that superseded everything else: finding them and bringing them home. Captain Marcus Reed had interrogated war criminals, negotiated with alien diplomats, and stared down the commanders of enemy fleets. None of that had prepared him for dealing with the bureaucratic maze of Station Nexus's administrative offices. The Regalian administrator's scales shifted through 3 different color patterns as Reed explained his request, each shift indicating a new level of discomfort or dishonesty. I assure you, Captain Reed, Station Nexus maintains the most comprehensive records of all beings aboard our facility. If there were human children present, they would be properly documented and cared for according to Galactic Council protocols for refugee minors. The administrator's voice carried the musical quality of his species, but Reed had learned to read Regalian body language during his years of combat. Every note was carefully calculated to convey authority while concealing truth. Then you won't mind if my people conduct a routine security sweep of the station, Reed said, his tone remaining diplomatically neutral despite the anger building in his chest. Trust Teddy. Standard procedure when docking at a new facility. The administrator's scales flickered to a pattern Reed didn't recognize, but the emotion behind it felt like panic. I'm afraid that would require special permits from the station council, and they are currently in session regarding trade disputes between the Corvin Empire and the Solari Collective. Perhaps you could return tomorrow? Reed leaned forward slightly, just enough to make the smaller aliens step back. Administrator Vexahay, I've been fighting a war for 5 years. I've learned to smell fear, and I've learned to smell lies. Die. Right now, you smell like both. So I'm going to ask you once more, with all the diplomatic courtesy I can manage. Are there human beings aboard this station who are not currently registered in your systems? The Regalian's scales cycled through what Reed now recognized as the color pattern for extreme distress. Behind Vexai, 2 Polaris security guards shifted nervously, their large eyes darting between the human captain and their administrator. Reed could sense that they were seconds away from escalating this conversation into something violent, and violence would only make finding the child harder. Captain, Vexai said slowly, his musical voice dropping to a whisper, there are complications regarding certain individuals aboard this station. Beings who exist in bureaucratic gray areas due to the current political situation between their homeworlds and the Galactic Council. Perhaps we could discuss this matter privately? Reed nodded, recognizing the offer for what it was, a chance to get information without forcing the administrator to admit official wrongdoing in front of witnesses. The Pellery guards were dismissed with a gesture, and Vex AI activated a privacy field around his office. The truth, Captain, is that 3 months ago a Regalian transport captain brought a human child to this station. She was supposedly traveling with a relative who was to meet them here, but when the relative failed to appear, the captain found himself in a difficult position. Human space is effectively quarantined, and no transport company will accept human passengers for fear of contamination from your dying worlds. Reed's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his voice level. So you abandoned a child on your station. We provided her with temporary housing and sustenance, Vex High said quickly, his scales shifting to patterns Reed interpreted as defensive justification. However, the other residents of the station became uncomfortable with her presence. There were complaints, concerns about contamination, fear that association with humanity might damage trade relationships. The child was relocated to areas where she would not disturb the station's commercial operations. You threw a 7-year-old into the maintenance levels. We ensured she had access to food and shelter, Vexai protested, but his scales betrayed his discomfort with the justification. The situation was temporary while we sought alternative arrangements for her care. Reed stood slowly, his full height making him tower over the Regalian administrator. Where is she now? Captain, you must understand the delicate nature of this situation. Station Nexus serves as a neutral zone for dozens of species, many of whom have complicated relationships with humanity. The presence of a human warship has already caused significant concern among our regular traders. If it becomes known that we have been harboring a human refugee, I asked where she is, not for your excuses. Vex's high scale cycled through patterns Reed was beginning to recognize as fear, resignation, and calculation. She has evaded our security personnel's attempts to monitor her movements. The last confirmed sighting was in Maintenance Level 7 near the waste processing facilities. Reed turned toward the door, but Vexahai's voice stopped him. Captain, there is another matter we must discuss. The child, she is not merely an inconvenience to the station's operations. Several of our residents believe she carries with her the curse of Earth's death. They believe that her presence brings misfortune, contamination, death itself. If word spreads that humans have returned to Station Nexus, there may be unpleasant reactions. Are you threatening her safety? I am warning you of a reality that exists whether I approve of it or not. There are species aboard this station that consider humanity to be a plague upon the galaxy. They tolerate the child's presence only because she is hidden, forgotten, invisible. But a human military vessel? That changes everything. Raid paused at the door, his hand on the control panel. Administrator, let me make something crystal clear. If any harm comes to that child because of my presence here, or because of any action taken by beings under your authority, you will discover exactly why the galaxy has nightmares about human warships. Do I make myself understood? Vex's high scale shifted to pure white. It was the color of absolute terror. Meanwhile, 3 levels below Reed's confrontation with station administration, Zara was discovering that her world had suddenly become far more dangerous. The maintenance tunnels that had been her refuge for 3 months were now filled with security teams conducting what they claimed were routine inspections, but Zara had survived by learning to read the intentions of the adults around her, and these inspections felt different. She pressed herself against the inner wall of a ventilation shaft, listening to the chittering voices of a Nyx security team as they searched the tunnel below her hiding spot. Their conversation was in rapid-fire Nyx dialect, but her translation implant caught enough words to understand the situation. Human vessel, contamination protocol, locate and contain, potential threat vector. They weren't just looking for her anymore. They were afraid of her. The security team moved on, their chittering fading into the distance, but Zara remained motionless in the ventilation shaft. She had learned patience during her months of survival, learned to wait until she was absolutely certain danger had passed before emerging from hiding. But as she waited, her mind raced with questions and possibilities. The human ship had changed everything. For 3 months she had been invisible, forgotten, a small ghost haunting the edges of station life. But now she was actively being hunted, and she didn't understand why. What was different? What had changed besides the arrival of people who looked like her? A new sound echoed through the ventilation system. Heavy footsteps that didn't match any of the alien species she had learned to identify. The footsteps were too measured, too purposeful, moving with a rhythm that seemed almost familiar. Zara carefully repositioned herself in the shaft to peer down through a maintenance grating. Below her, a figure in a dark blue uniform was examining the tunnel where the Nyx security team had been searching. The figure was tall, with the same basic body shape as Zara herself, and when he looked up toward the ventilation systems, she found herself staring into eyes that were the same color as her own. It was the human from the ship. Captain Reed had insisted on conducting the search personally. despite Lieutenant Chen's protests that such work was beneath his rank. But Reed understood something that his tactical manual couldn't teach. Sometimes the most important missions required a personal touch. If there was a human child hiding in these tunnels, she would be terrified, probably feral after months of survival, and unlikely to trust anyone in a uniform. But she might trust another human. Reed examined the maintenance tunnel carefully, noting the signs of recent habitation that the alien security teams had missed. Scratch marks on the walls where small fingers had gripped for balance. A tiny depression in the dust where someone had curled up to sleep. Food wrappers that had been carefully hidden but not completely eliminated. She was here, somewhere close, and she was watching him. "Hello," Reed said quietly, his voice echoing gently off the metal walls. "My name is Marcus. I'm looking for someone who might need help." Silence answered him, but Reed had learned patience during long years of warfare. He settled himself against one wall of the tunnel, making himself appear less threatening, and continued speaking in the same gentle tone. "I know this place hasn't been kind to you. I know the people here have made you feel like you don't belong, like you're something to be afraid of. But I want you to know something important. You're not alone anymore." Above him, in the ventilation shaft, Zara felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. The words were in her language, her actual language, not the translated approximation she had been hearing for months. But more than that, the tone was something she hadn't heard since her parents died. The sound of an adult speaking to her as if she mattered, as if she was worth protecting. "I know you're scared," Reed continued. "I know you don't have any reason to trust me, but I'm not going to leave without you. I'm not going to abandon you here." Zara's small hands gripped the edges of the ventilation grating. Every instinct she had developed during her months of survival screamed at her to stay hidden, to remain invisible, to trust no one. But there was something in the human's voice that reminded her of her father reading bedtime stories, of her mother singing lullabies, of a time when the world had been safe and warm and full of people who loved her. Slowly, carefully, she pushed open the ventilation grating. Reed looked up as the small panel swung open above him, and his breath caught in his throat as a tiny figure dropped down into the tunnel. She was smaller than he had expected, thin to the point of malnourishment, with tangled hair and clothes that had clearly been improvised from salvaged materials. But her eyes held an intelligence and wariness that belonged on someone 10 times her age. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Reed remained seated against the wall, making no move that might startle her. Zara stood pressed against the opposite wall, ready to run at the first sign of danger. "What's your name?" Reed asked softly. "Zara," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. She hadn't spoken to another person in weeks. "Zara. That's a beautiful name. How long have you been on this station, Zara?" 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days. The precision of her answer told Reed more about her state of mind than he wanted to know. She had been counting, marking time, holding on to sanity through the simple act of remembering how long she had been alone. "That's a long time. You've been very brave." Zara's eyes filled with tears at the word brave. No one had called her brave. Everyone who looked at her saw contamination, death, something to be avoided and feared. But this man, this human, saw something else. "Are you here to take me away?" she asked, and Reed could hear both hope and terror in her voice. "If you want to come with me, yes, but only if you want to. I won't force you." "Where would we go?" Reed considered his answer carefully. The truth was that he didn't know. His ship was designed for military operations, not for caring for children. His crew were soldiers, not caregivers, and human space was a scattered collection of refugee colonies that were barely holding together under constant threat. But none of that mattered as much as the simple fact that she was alone, afraid, and had been abandoned by people who should have protected her. "We'll figure that out together," he said finally. "But I promise you this, you'll never be alone again." Zara took a tentative step forward, then stopped. "The people here say I'm cursed. They say I bring death and bad luck. What if they're right? What if something bad happens to you because of me? Reed felt anger burn in his chest, but he kept it out of his voice when he answered, Zara, listen to me very carefully. You are not cursed. Teddy, you are not unlucky. You are not responsible for anything bad that has happened. You're a little girl who lost her home and her family, and the people here should have taken care of you. Instead, they failed you. That's not your fault. But Earth's death wasn't your fault either. Nothing that happened there was your fault. You were a child, and children don't cause planets to die. Zara took another step forward, then another. When she was close enough, Reed slowly extended his hand toward her, palm up, letting her decide whether to take it. She stared at his hand for a long moment, then looked up at his face. You really won't leave me? I really won't leave you. Zara placed her small hand in his much larger one, and Reed felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of his mission. He had come to Station Nexus for routine supply acquisition and intelligence gathering. He was leaving with something far more precious, a reminder of what humanity was fighting to preserve. But as they made their way back toward the docking bays, Reed's military instincts were already analyzing the tactical situation. Word of his presence was spreading through the station, and word of Zara's rescue would spread even faster. Every hostile species that had written humanity off as a dying race would now know that humans were still actively moving through the galaxy, still finding and protecting their own. This wouldn't be the end of Zara's story. This would be the beginning of something much larger and more dangerous than a simple rescue mission. But as he felt the small hand in his and saw the first genuine smile he had witnessed from her, Reed found himself looking forward to that danger. The galaxy had abandoned one human child and assumed no one would come looking for her. They were about to learn how wrong they had been about that assumption, and how wrong they had been about humanity itself. Lieutenant Sarah Chen had served under Captain Reed for 3 years, through the darkest period of humanity's war for survival. She had seen him make impossible decisions, sacrifice ships and crews for strategic advantages, and carry the weight of their species' near extinction on his shoulders without ever showing doubt or weakness. But she had never seen him look at anything the way he was looking at the small human child, who now sat in the ship's medical bay. Zara perched on the edge of the examination table, her legs dangling over the side as Dr. Kim Martinez conducted her medical assessment. The child was severely malnourished but surprisingly healthy given her circumstances. More concerning was her emotional state. She flinched at sudden movements, refused to let Reed leave the room, and spoke in whispers when she spoke at all. Malnutrition, dehydration, minor vitamin deficiencies. Dr. Martinez reported quietly to Reed and Chen as they observed from the doorway. Nothing that proper nutrition and care won't fix. But the psychological trauma, she shook her head. Captain, this child has been surviving in a hostile environment for months. The fact that she's functional at all speaks to remarkable resilience, but she's going to need time and stability to fully recover. Reed nodded, but his attention was focused on Zara herself. She was examining the medical bay with wide eyes, touching the smooth surfaces of the examination equipment with careful fingers. Everything here was human-made, designed for human use, and Chen could see the wonder in the child's expression as she experienced her own species' technology for the first time in months. "Where do we take her?" Chen asked quietly. "We're not exactly equipped for childcare, and our next mission is a reconnaissance run through hostile territory." Before Reed could answer, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Reed activated his comm unit with a gesture. "Reed here. Captain, this is Admiral Sarah Okafor aboard the Defiance. I need to speak with you immediately regarding the situation on Station Nexus." Secure channel. Reed exchanged glances with Chen. Admiral Okafor commanded the 7th Fleet, one of only 3 remaining human battle groups. Her presence in this sector meant something significant was happening. "Zara, I need to speak with some important people for a few minutes. Dr. Martinez is going to show you the rest of the ship, okay?" Zara's grip tightened on the edge of the examination table. Will you come back? I promise I'll come back. Dr. Martinez will take good care of you. After Zara had been gently coaxed out of the medical bay with the promise of seeing the ship's recreation facilities, Reed and Chen made their way to the bridge. The secure communication came through as a holographic projection, showing Admiral Okafor's stern features and the bridge of her flagship behind her. Captain Reed, I understand you've made an interesting discovery on Station Nexus. Reed wasn't surprised that word had already reached the Admiral. Information traveled fast in the small communities of human refugee fleets. Yes, ma'am. A human child apparently abandoned there several months ago. That's not the only interesting development, Captain. 3 hours ago, we received intelligence reports from our deep space reconnaissance units. Station Nexus has been in communication with the Corvan Empire regarding what they're calling a contamination incident and requesting immediate military assistance. Chen felt her blood run cold. They're calling for military action against a 7-year-old child? Admiral Okafor's expression darkened. It appears that your rescue operation has triggered a panic among certain alien factions. They're claiming that active human military presence in neutral space represents a violation of the informal quarantine that's been in place since Earth's evacuation. They want the child returned to Station Nexus and your ship escorted out of the sector. Reed's jaw tightened. Over my dead body. That may be exactly what they have in mind, Captain. Intelligence suggests that several hostile species see this as an opportunity to eliminate one of our remaining ship groups and send a message to any other human survivors who might be hiding in the neutral zones.
The implications hit Chen immediately.
They've been hunting down survivors, haven't they? That's why we haven't encountered any human refugees in our operations. They've been systematically locating and eliminating them. Admiral Okafor nodded grimly. We believe so. The discovery of this child suggests there may be others, scattered individuals and small groups who escaped the initial evacuation but have been surviving in the margins of galactic society. If that's true, then every hostile species in the galaxy has an interest in ensuring they never regroup with our main forces. Reed moved to the ship's tactical display, his mind already working through defensive scenarios. What are my orders, Admiral? Your orders are to protect that child and return to Fleet Rendezvous Point Tango 7. But, Captain, I need you to understand the broader tactical situation. This incident has forced us to accelerate our timeline for Operation Homecoming. Chen had heard rumors about Operation Homecoming, a classified project that involves some kind of major strategic shift in humanity's approach to the war. Reed's expression suggested he knew more about it than she did. How much acceleration are we talking about? Reed asked. The operation launches in 72 hours. Every available ship, every human survivor we can locate, every resource we've been conserving for the past 5 years. It's time to remind the galaxy who we are and what we're capable of. Before Reed could respond, the ship's tactical officer interrupted. Captain, I'm detecting incoming vessels on long-range sensors. 3 Corvan heavy cruisers and a Zalari attack squadron heading directly for our position. Admiral Okafor's image nodded grimly. It appears the welcoming committee has arrived. Captain, you have approximately 40 minutes before they reach weapons range. I strongly suggest you use that time to leave the area. What about the other human survivors who might be on Station Nexus? Reed asked. If they're hunting down our people, Captain, sometimes tactical decisions require accepting losses to preserve strategic advantages. That child is a priority asset now. She represents proof that human survivors exist outside our known refugee populations. We cannot afford to lose her. Reed understood the logic, but Chen could see the conflict in his expression. Military necessity versus individual conscience, the eternal dilemma of command in wartime. Understood, Admiral. We'll see you at Tango 7. The communication ended, leaving Reed and Chen alone on the bridge with the weight of impossible decisions. Captain, Chen said quietly, there's something else we need to consider. The way the aliens reacted to the child, it wasn't just fear of contamination. It was something deeper. With trust, Teddy. They're genuinely terrified of human children. Reed looked at her questioningly. Think about it, Chen continued. Adults can be soldiers, threats, enemies to be eliminated. But children represent something different. They represent a future. The alien species that are hunting down our survivors. They're not just trying to eliminate our current military capabilities. They're trying to ensure we never recover, never rebuild, never grow strong again. The truth of that observation settled over Reed like a heavy weight. The systematic elimination of human refugees wasn't just military strategy. It was genocide, pure and simple. The alien species had decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to survive and recover. But they made a mistake, Reed said slowly, his voice carrying a new edge. They let one survive, and now we know what they've been doing. Chen nodded. Operation Homecoming isn't just about military action, is it? It's about rescue and recovery, finding our people and bringing them home. Among other things, Reed confirmed. Sarah, I want you to prepare the ship for immediate departure, but first, I want you to do something for me. Scan Station Nexus for any other human biosignatures. If there are more of our people on that station, I need to know about it. Sir, Admiral Okafor's orders were clear. Admiral Okafor's orders were to protect the child and return to rendezvous. She didn't specifically forbid me from gathering intelligence on other potential survivors. Run the scan. Chen moved to the sensor station, her fingers working across the controls. The ship's advanced sensor array, designed for detecting hidden enemy installations, could penetrate most station shielding when properly configured. I'm reading... Captain, this is strange. I'm detecting what appear to be human genetic markers in several locations throughout the station, but they're not showing up as living beings. Reed's expression darkened. Show me! The tactical display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of Station Nexus with red markers indicating the locations of human genetic material. The pattern was scattered but telling areas throughout the station where humans had been present but were no longer alive. Organic remains, Chen said quietly. Captain, I think we're looking at evidence of what happened to the other human refugees who found their way to Station Nexus. Reed stared at the display for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists. When he spoke, his voice carried a cold fury that Chen had rarely heard from him. Prepare the ship for departure, Lieutenant, but also prepare a full sensor data package for transmission to Admiral Okafor. I want her to know exactly what we found here. And the approaching hostile ships? Reed looked toward the ship's internal communication system, knowing that somewhere within the vessel, a 7-year-old human child was experiencing safety and care for the first time in months. Let him come. They want to know what happens when you hunt human children? They're about to find out. But even as he spoke the words, Reed's tactical mind was already analyzing their situation. 3 Corvin heavy cruisers and a Zalari attack squadron represented significant firepower, more than his single ship could handle in direct combat. Running was the smart choice, the tactically sound decision that would preserve his crew and protect Zara. However, running would also send a message to every species in the galaxy that humans could be intimidated, that they could be driven away from their own people with a show of force. And Reed was beginning to understand that this incident was about much more than one rescued child. This was about whether humanity would continue to hide and run, or whether they would stand and fight for their right to exist. As the ship's engines powered up for departure, Reed made a decision that would echo across the galaxy within hours. We activated the ship's wideband communications array and began broadcasting on all frequencies used by the various species represented on Station Nexus. This is Captain Marcus Reed of the human vessel Stellar Wind. We have discovered evidence of systematic persecution and murder of human refugees in supposed neutral space. This persecution ends now. Chen looked at him in surprise. Captain, that's going to bring every hostile ship in the sector down on us. Reed smiled, and Chen realized it was the same expression he wore when he was about to do something tactically insane but strategically brilliant. I'm counting on it, Lieutenant. It's time the galaxy remembered what happens when you threaten our children. In the ship's recreation area, Zara looked up from the picture book Dr. Papantry Martinez had given her as alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The human adults around her moved with sudden urgency, but none of them seemed frightened. Instead, they seemed determined. For the first time since Earth died, Zara began to believe that maybe the monsters who had been hunting her kind had finally made a mistake. Maybe they had finally pushed the wrong people too far. Maybe, just maybe, it was time for the galaxy to remember why humans were so dangerous when they were protecting their own. The Corvan War Commander Takran had fought in 17 major campaigns across 12 star systems. He had led the destruction of 3 rebel colonies and personally executed hundreds of enemy combatants. His service record was decorated with commendations for ruthlessness, tactical brilliance, and absolute dedication to the Corvan Empire's expansion throughout the galaxy. But as his heavy cruiser Bloodhammer approached the coordinates where a single human vessel waited, Thakran felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare: uncertainty. "War Commander, the human vessel is maintaining position," reported his tactical officer. "No attempt at retreat or evasion. They're waiting for us." Takran studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human ship was significantly smaller than any of his 3 cruisers, and even combined with the Zalari attack squadron approaching from the opposite vector, they outnumbered the humans 15-1 in terms of combat vessels. This should be a simple elimination mission: destroy the human ship, recover any useful technology, and send a clear message to any other human survivors that neutral space was no longer safe for their kind. But humans didn't behave according to tactical logic. Takran had studied the reports from the war's early campaigns, when human resistance had been fierce and unpredictable. Even facing overwhelming odds, human vessels had consistently inflicted far more damage than their size and capabilities should have allowed. They fought like cornered predators, with a viciousness that most civilized species found disturbing. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel," his communications officer announced. "They're requesting to speak with the commanding officer." Takran considered the request. Standard military doctrine suggested ignoring enemy communications during combat approach, but intelligence value sometimes outweighed tactical considerations. "Put them through." The main view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the human vessel. The human captain appeared to be middle-aged by their species standards, wearing a dark military uniform that bore the scars of previous combat. But it was his eyes that gave Takran pause. They held the cold calculation of someone who had made peace with the prospect of dying in battle. "I am Captain Marcus Reed of the Stellar Wind. Am I speaking with the Corvan commander?" Takran activated his own visual transmission. "I am War Commander Takran of the Imperial cruiser Bloodhammer. You will surrender your vessel immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any human refugees aboard your ship will be returned to Station Nexus for proper processing." Reed's expression didn't change, but Takran noticed the human's hands clench slightly, a micro-expression that suggested controlled anger. "War Commander, I want to make sure I understand your position correctly. You're demanding that I surrender a 7-year-old human child to beings who have been systematically murdering refugees in neutral space." "The child represents a contamination risk to civilized species," Takran replied, following the official justification he had been given. "Proper quarantine protocols must be observed." "I see. And the proper quarantine protocol for human children involves murder, does it?" Thakran felt his warrior instincts reacting to the challenge in the human's voice. "You are in no position to make demands or accusations, Captain Reed. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Resurrender now, and your crew will be treated according to the conventions of war." Reed smiled, and Thakran realized with a chill that the expression held no warmth or humor, only the promise of violence. "War Commander, you seem to be under the impression that I'm going to surrender. Let me clarify something for you. Humans don't abandon their children. We don't surrender them to species that view them as contamination, and we certainly don't negotiate with people who commit genocide for convenience." "Then you choose to die for nothing," Takran said. though he found himself disturbed by the humans' absolute certainty. Not for nothing, War Commander, for principle. And also to send a message that's long overdue. The transmission ended, leaving Takran staring at a blank screen. Something about the human captain's demeanor troubled him. Reed had spoken like someone who had an advantage he wasn't revealing, but Takran's sensor showed only a single human vessel against his combined fleet. "Sir, should we proceed with the attack?" his tactical officer asked. Thakran was about to give the order when his long-range sensors officer interrupted with a report that changed everything. "War Commander, I'm detecting massive hyperspace disturbances throughout this sector. Multiple incoming vessels, all showing human energy signatures." The tactical display updated to show new contacts materializing from hyperspace at multiple vectors around their position. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of red markers indicating human vessels. Thakran's certainty evaporated as he watched his tactical advantage transform into a potential massacre. "How many ships?" he demanded. "With trust, Teddy. Still calculating, sir. At least 1,200 vessels, possibly more. Everything from single-pilot fighters to heavy battle cruisers. Sir, I've never seen a fleet this large." Aboard the Stellar Wind, Captain Reed watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction as the full might of humanity's scattered refugee fleets materialized around Station Nexus. Admiral Okafor's 7th Fleet formed the core of the formation, but ships were arriving from sectors throughout the galaxy. Vessels that had been hiding in deep space for years, survivors who had received the activation signal for Operation Homecoming and dropped everything to answer the call. "Captain, we have Admiral Okafor on priority channel," Lieutenant Chen reported. The Admiral's holographic image appeared on the bridge, her expression mixing concern and approval. "Captain Reed, I hope you know what you've done. Your broadcast activated every sleeper cell and refugee group we've been maintaining contact with. This is the largest human fleet assembled since the evacuation of Earth." Reed looked toward the ship's internal sensors, where he could track Sarah's location in the ship's small recreational area. Dr. Martinez was reading her stories while the child ate what was probably the first proper meal she had enjoyed in months. "With respect, Admiral, I know exactly what I've done. The galaxy's hostile species have been hunting our people for years, picking us off in small groups, ensuring we never had the chance to regroup. They made a mistake when they touched one of our children. It's time to remind them why that was a mistake." On the main view screen, the Corvin and Zalari attack fleets appeared suddenly insignificant against the growing cloud of human vessels. But Reed knew that raw numbers weren't the real advantage they had gained. The real advantage was psychological. "Admiral," Reed continued, "request permission to address the fleet." Admiral Okafor nodded. "You started this, Captain. You might as well finish it." Reed activated the fleet-wide communication system, knowing that his words would be heard by thousands of human survivors who had spent years hiding, running, believing they were the last remnants of a dying species. "This is Captain Marcus Reed to all human vessels. Today we discovered something that changes everything about our situation. We found one of our children abandoned and hunted on Station Nexus, surviving alone for months while the galaxy's species treated her as contamination to be eliminated." He paused, letting the impact of those words settle throughout the fleet. Reed could see the fury building in the expressions of his own crew, and he knew that anger was being mirrored across hundreds of bridges. But we also discovered evidence that she was not the first. Human genetic remains throughout the station tell the story of systematic murder, of refugees who trusted neutral space to provide sanctuary and instead found genocide. "This ends today." Reed gestured toward the tactical display showing the alien fleets. "The Corvin Empire and their Zalari allies came here expecting to eliminate a single human vessel and send a message that our species would continue to be hunted to extinction. Instead, they're about to learn the most important lesson in galactic history. You don't hunt human children without consequences." Admiral Okafor's voice cut across the command frequency. "All ships, this is Admiral Okafor. Battle stations. Today we remind the galaxy that humanity is not extinct, we are not defeated, and we are not afraid. Any vessel that threatens human refugees or human children is hereby designated as a hostile target. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. War Commander Takran watched in growing horror as the human fleet completed its deployment. His tactical computer calculated engagement probabilities and delivered results that approached statistical impossibility. Even accounting for the technological advantages of Corvan military vessels, the numerical superiority of the human fleet was overwhelming. "War Commander, the human fleet is hailing us," his communications officer reported. "Put them through." The image that appeared on his screen wasn't Captain Reed this time, but a woman wearing the uniform of a human admiral. Her expression was absolutely cold, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding fleets. "War Commander Takran, I am Admiral Sarah Okafor of the Human Defense Fleet. You came here to eliminate a single ship and terrorize a child. Instead, you have triggered the reunification of the human species. I am offering you one opportunity to withdraw from this sector and report to your superiors that the era of hunting human refugees is over." Takran's warrior pride rebelled against the idea of retreat, but his tactical training recognized an impossible situation when he saw one. "Admiral, your fleet may have numerical superiority, but you are still in violation of galactic law by maintaining military forces in neutral space." Admiral Okafor's expression didn't change. "War Commander, galactic law ceased to apply to this situation the moment your people began systematically murdering children. You have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal, or we will demonstrate exactly why the galaxy was so eager to drive humanity to the brink of extinction." Thakran cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "Begin withdrawal to hyperspace. Signal the Zalari squadron to follow our lead. Sir, the Empire will consider this a tactical retreat in the face of an inferior enemy. The Empire will consider this a strategic assessment that prevented the unnecessary loss of 3 heavy cruisers," Takran said firmly. Sometimes the greatest victory is recognizing when not to fight. As his ships began their withdrawal, Thakran continued to study the human fleet on his sensors. What disturbed him most wasn't their numerical advantage, it was their formation and behavior. These weren't desperate refugees or scattered survivors. These were military vessels operating under unified command, with coordination that suggested years of preparation and planning. Humanity wasn't dying out. They had been hiding, building strength, preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. And Takran had just handed them the perfect excuse to reveal themselves. Aboard the Stellar Wind, Captain Reed felt the weight of history settling around him as he watched the hostile fleets retreat into hyperspace. In the span of a few hours, the strategic balance of the galaxy had shifted fundamentally. Humanity was no longer a scattered collection of refugee populations. They were once again a unified military force. But Reed understood that this victory was only the beginning. The alien species that had been hunting human survivors wouldn't simply accept this reversal. They would regroup, plan, and return with greater force. The war that humanity thought they had been losing was about to become something much larger and more dangerous. "Captain," Lieutenant Chen said quietly, "sensor readings show additional human vessels still arriving from hyperspace. The fleet count is now over 1,500 ships." Reed nodded, but his attention was drawn to the ship's internal sensors. Zara had fallen asleep in the recreation area, finally safe enough to rest deeply for the first time in months. Dr. Martinez sat nearby, keeping watch over her with the protective instincts of a parent. This was what they were fighting for, not territory or resources or political advantage, but the simple right of their children to exist without fear. The alien species that had driven them from Earth and hunted them through the galaxy had made a fundamental miscalculation about human nature. They had assumed that survival was humanity's primary motivation. They hadn't understood that for humans, survival was secondary to protection of their young. And that miscalculation was about to reshape the balance of power throughout the known galaxy. As Reed prepared to transfer Zara to Admiral Okafor's flagship for proper medical care and protection, he knew that her story would spread throughout the human fleet within hours. Every survivor who heard it would understand exactly what they were fighting for, and exactly what the stakes had become. The galaxy had abandoned one small human child, assuming no one would care enough to come looking for her. They were about to discover how catastrophically wrong that assumption had been. 6 months after the incident at Station Nexus, the galactic political landscape had transformed beyond recognition. What military historians were already calling the Nexus Awakening had triggered a cascade of events that reached every corner of known space. In the secured council chambers of the Galactic Confederation, representatives from 24 species gathered for an emergency session that many privately believed would determine the future of interstellar civilization. Ambassador Veltar of the Zalari Collective stood before the assembled delegates, his crystalline features showing stress patterns that his species typically reserved for imminent death. The holographic display behind him showed tactical assessments that painted an increasingly grim picture for the Confederation's military capabilities. Honored delegates, Veltar began, his melodious voice carrying undertones of desperation. In the 6 months since humanity revealed its true fleet strength, we have recorded over 300 incidents of human military intervention across 17 sectors. Every known refugee camp, every hidden survivor group, every human individual trapped in what we considered secure containment facilities has been located and extracted. The Corvin representative, General Crixhat, interrupted with a growl of frustration. What you're calling intervention, Ambassador, is systematic military aggression. Human warships are operating with impunity in sovereign space, ignoring all diplomatic protocols and threatening any force that attempts to interfere with their operations. Veltar's crystalline form shifted to patterns indicating reluctant agreement. The general speaks accurately. But perhaps more concerning is their apparent intelligence network. Somehow, humanity has maintained detailed knowledge of refugee locations and conditions throughout the galaxy, despite our efforts to disrupt their communications and monitor their movements. In the observer section of the council chamber, a figure that few delegates had noticed stirred slightly. Dr. Elena Vasquez, officially listed as a neutral academic observer from the Independent Research Coalition, had been quietly recording every word of the proceedings. What the delegates didn't know was that Dr. Vasquez was one of dozens of human intelligence operatives who had been embedded in alien institutions for years, gathering information and waiting for activation orders that had finally come. The Regalian delegate, Administrator Prime Zexui, activated the chamber's central holographic display to show a sector map highlighting human fleet movements. The tactical pattern is clear. They're not simply rescuing isolated survivors. They're systematically dismantling our containment infrastructure. Every facility where we housed human refugees for processing has been neutralized. The euphemism hung in the air like a toxic gas. Everyone in the chamber understood what processing had meant, and everyone understood that humanity had discovered the full scope of the genocide that had been conducted under the cover of refugee management. "How many of our facilities have been compromised?" asked the Polari representative, her large eyes reflecting the fear that was spreading through the non-human alliance. "All of them," Zexui admitted, his scales shifting to patterns indicating profound dismay. "The humans appear to have detailed intelligence on every refugee processing center, every containment facility, every research installation where human subjects were studied." Dr. Vasquez allowed herself a small, cold smile. The intelligence network that was terrifying the alien delegates had been years in the making, built by humans who had sacrificed their own safety to remain embedded in alien society. When Station Nexus had triggered Operation Homecoming, it hadn't just activated military fleets, it had activated an entire intelligence apparatus that the alien species hadn't even known existed. General Crixhat stood, his massive frame dominating the chamber. "We must address the fundamental strategic reality. Humanity is no longer a dying species that can be contained or managed. They have revealed military capabilities that rival our combined fleets, and they are operating under rules of engagement that consider any threat to human civilians as justification for total warfare. The chamber erupted in nervous chittering, crystalline chiming, and the various sounds that different species made when confronted with existential threat. The Corvin General's assessment was accurate, and everyone present knew it. Humanity hadn't just survived their supposed extinction. They had evolved into something more dangerous than they had ever been before. Ambassador Veltar called for order, his voice carrying harmonic frequencies designed to calm agitated beings. General Crixat raises the central issue. How do we proceed with a species that has demonstrated they will use overwhelming military force to protect even individual members of their population? We negotiate, said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. The delegates turned in surprise as a figure in human military uniform entered the chamber, flanked by 2 additional humans in diplomatic attire. The lead figure was a woman of middle years, wearing the insignia of a human admiral, and her presence caused immediate panic among the alien representatives. "I am Admiral Sarah Okafor, commanding the Human Defense Fleet," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos of alien alarm calls. "And I believe it's time we had a direct conversation about the future of human-alien relations in this galaxy." Security forces throughout the chamber activated, but Admiral Okafor raised her hand in a gesture of peace. "Before anyone considers this an act of aggression, you should know that your security systems allowed us entry. We're here under the diplomatic protection protocols established by your own Galactic Confederation Charter." General Crixat's warrior instincts were screaming for immediate action, but his political training recognized the trap. If humanity was invoking diplomatic protection, it meant they had legal justification for their presence, which meant someone with Confederation access codes had provided them with official status. Doc Vasquez stood from her position in the observer section, removing the synthetic features that had disguised her human characteristics. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Senior Intelligence Analyst for Human Fleet Command. I believe my credentials as a neutral academic observer are in order, though perhaps my actual species affiliation should have been disclosed earlier." The chamber fell into stunned silence as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just maintained an intelligence network, they had infiltrated the Galactic Confederation itself. Admiral Okafor moved to the chamber's central podium, her presence commanding attention from every delegate present. "Honored representatives, we come before you today to discuss the future of interspecies relations in this galaxy. For the past 5 years, your various governments have operated under the assumption that humanity was a dying species that could be safely ignored, contained, or eliminated as convenient." She activated her own holographic display showing footage from Station Nexus, specifically images of Zara cowering in maintenance tunnels and the evidence of human genetic remains throughout the facility. This assumption led to policies that we can only describe as systematic genocide. Human refugees seeking sanctuary in neutral space were imprisoned, experimented upon, and ultimately eliminated. Human children were treated as contamination to be disposed of. All of this was done under the belief that humanity lacked the resources or coordination to respond effectively. The footage shifted to show the massive human fleet that had assembled at Station Nexus, and then to recent military operations where human forces had liberated refugee camps and containment facilities across multiple sectors. "You were wrong," Admiral Okafor said simply. "Humanity was never dying. We were preparing. Every ship you thought destroyed was rebuilt in hidden facilities. Every refugee you thought eliminated was rescued and relocated to secure colonies. Every military defeat was a strategic withdrawal designed to protect our civilian population while we rebuilt our strength." Ambassador Veltar's crystalline features showed patterns of confusion and growing fear. "Admiral, what exactly are you proposing?" Admiral Okafor's expression remained neutral, but her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "We're proposing a new framework for galactic civilization, one that recognizes humanity's right to exist, to protect our people, and to intervene wherever human beings are threatened with persecution or harm. General Crixhat stepped forward aggressively. "You're demanding carte blanche for military intervention across the galaxy? We're demanding that crimes against humanity be treated as acts of war," Admiral Okafor corrected. "Every species represented in this chamber has, directly or indirectly, participated in the attempted extermination of human refugees. Some of you ordered the killings. Others simply looked the other way. All of you benefited from policies designed to ensure humanity never recovered from Earth's destruction." The Admiral paused, letting the weight of accusations settle throughout the chamber. "But we're not here for revenge. We're here to establish a new equilibrium." She activated another display, this one showing proposed territorial divisions and sovereignty boundaries. Humanity claims the right to establish protected zones for human refugees and colonies. We claim the right to patrol neutral space for evidence of anti-human persecution. And we claim the right to respond to threats against our people with whatever level of force we deem appropriate. And if we refuse to accept these demands? Administrator Prime Zexweedy asked, though his scale patterns already indicated he knew the answer. Admiral Okafor smiled, and every alien delegate in the chamber recognized the expression as predatory. "Then you'll discover exactly why your ancestors were so eager to drive humanity to the brink of extinction. The difference is that this time, we're not desperate refugees fighting for our lives. We're a unified military force, fighting to ensure that what happened to our children on Station Nexus never happens again." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward to stand beside the Admiral. "The delegates should also be aware that our intelligence network has documented every facility, every policy decision, and every individual responsible for the attempted genocide of human refugees. We know exactly who participated in these crimes, and we know where to find them." The threat was clear, and it sent waves of panic through the alien representatives. Humanity wasn't just offering them a choice between war and peace, they were offering them a choice between accepting human protection for their own people and facing the systematic elimination of everyone responsible for 5 years of genocide. "Admiral, surely you understand that your demands would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. No single species has ever been granted such broad authority over interstellar affairs." Admiral Okafor nodded. "You're absolutely correct. And if any other species had demonstrated the same commitment to protecting their young, regardless of cost, we would support similar authority for them. But the evidence suggests that only humanity operates under the principle that children, all children, even orphaned and abandoned ones, are worth fighting and dying for." She gestured toward the holographic image of Zara that's still displayed on the chamber's screens. "That little girl survived for 3 months in your station's maintenance tunnels because every species that encountered her decided she was too dangerous, too contaminated, too problematic to help. When one human ship discovered her existence, it triggered the mobilization of the largest military fleet in galactic history." The Admiral's voice softened slightly, but the steel beneath remained evident. "That, honored delegates, is the difference between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. We don't abandon our children, no matter the cost. We don't negotiate away their safety for political convenience, and we certainly don't trust their protection to species that consider them expendable." General Crixhat's warrior instincts finally overcame his political caution. "Admiral, your species has become exactly what we feared when we first encountered you. You're expansionist, aggressive, and absolutely ruthless in pursuit of your goals. The galaxy united to contain humanity precisely because we recognized these characteristics." Admiral Okafor considered this assessment carefully before responding. "General, you may be correct, but you overlooked one crucial factor in your analysis. The galaxy created the threat you now face. Every human child you abandoned, every refugee you murdered, every colony you destroyed, all of that taught humanity exactly who we could trust and who we couldn't." She activated the chamber's main display one final time, showing a real-time tactical map of human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. The scope was staggering. Humanity had military assets in every major sector positioned to protect their interests and respond to threats against their people. "The choice before this council is simple. Admiral Okafor concluded. Accept humanity's new role in galactic affairs and work with us to establish a civilized framework for protecting all species civilians, or continue your genocidal policies and discover what happens when you push a species to the point where they have nothing left to lose except their children. As the Admiral and her delegation prepared to leave the chamber, Ambassador Veltar called out one final question. Admiral, what assurance do we have that humanity won't use its military power to dominate other species? Admiral Okafor paused at the chamber entrance. Ambassador, I think you misunderstand our motivation. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want our children to be safe in it. But if ensuring their safety requires us to become the most feared military force in known space, then that's exactly what we'll do. After the humans departed, the council chamber remained silent for long minutes as each delegate contemplated the new reality they faced. The balance of galactic power hadn't shifted. It had been completely overturned by a species that most of them had written off as extinct. In the months that followed, historians would mark the council session as the moment when humanity's transition from refugee population to galactic superpower became official. But for those who had been present, the real moment of recognition had come earlier, when they realized that they had systematically tormented the young of a species that considered protecting children to be more important than survival itself. The galaxy had learned far too late why it was dangerous to abandon a human child. Now they would live with the consequences of that lesson for generations to come. Far from the political chambers and diplomatic negotiations, on a peaceful colony world in the Tau Ceti system, Zara played in a garden filled with flowers that had been genetically modified to thrive in alien soil. At 8 years old, she was learning to read and write, studying mathematics and history, and slowly healing from the trauma of her months alone on Station Nexus. She didn't fully understand the galactic transformation that her rescue had triggered, but she knew that she was safe, surrounded by adults who would never abandon her, never leave her to survive alone in the dark spaces between the stars. And across the galaxy, in refugee camps and hidden colonies, in military academies and research stations, human children grew up knowing that their safety was guaranteed not by the mercy of alien species, but by the absolute determination of their own people to protect them at any cost. The galaxy had tried to break humanity by targeting their most vulnerable members. Instead, they had forged them into something far more dangerous than they had ever been before. A species that would go to any length, pay any price, and fight any war necessary to ensure that no human child would ever again face the universe alone.